The vast command center of the Coalition flagship hummed with activity. Admiral Taiho's 4 eyes blinked rapidly as he watched the holographic display. The blue sphere representing Outpost Kappa flickered and then vanished completely. Another world lost to the Void Swarm. "That's the 3rd defensive position this week," said Commander Minot, his metallic skin reflecting the red emergency lights. Taiho's exoskeleton clicked as he adjusted his posture. 10,000 years of Galactic Coalition history, and never had they faced such a threat. The Void Swarm wasn't an enemy you could negotiate with or intimidate with superior firepower. It was a cloud of microscopic machines that ate everything in its path and made more of itself. "Show me the progression pattern," Taiho ordered. The holographic display zoomed out, revealing a spreading darkness across the Coalition territory. The Void Swarm's advance was relentless. Planets that once held billions of beings were now just empty husks, stripped of all usable matter. Scientist Neri approached, her 6 tentacles moving nervously. Her species, the Allo, were known for their analytical minds, but even she seemed shaken. "Admiral, I must report that our latest countermeasure has failed," she said. "The radiation pulse that disabled the swarm last month is now completely ineffective. The machines have modified their shielding." "How quickly did they adapt?" Taiho asked. 3 hours after deployment," Neri answered, her voice dropping. "They're learning faster now." Taiho turned away, trying to hide his dismay from the crew. 3 years of fighting this menace. 3 years of watching it consume planet after planet. The Coalition had thrown everything at it. Antimatter bombs, quantum disruptors, gravity weapons. Nothing worked for long. The swarm always adapted. "It defies all logic," Neri continued, her tentacles curling anxiously around her datapad. "The swarm adapts to every countermeasure within hours. It's as if it can predict our strategies." The ship's communication system chimed, interrupting their grim conversation. "Admiral, we're receiving a distress call," reported Lieutenant Gio. "It's coming from the Sol system." "Sol," Taiho repeated. "That's the human homeworld, isn't it? They're barely space-capable." The humans were newcomers to the galactic community. The Coalition had only discovered Earth 50 years ago. Humans had just begun establishing colonies on their neighboring planets. They weren't even full members of the Coalition yet. "Put it through," Taiho ordered, more out of courtesy than expectation of help. The view screen activated, showing a human female with short black hair and determined eyes. "This is Dr. Ju of Earth Science Division. We've detected unusual particle activity in our outer solar system. Based on the Coalition alerts, we believe it's the early stages of a Void Swarm incursion." Taiho felt a momentary pang of sympathy. The humans had no idea what they were facing. Their primitive weapons would be useless against the swarm. "Dr. Ju, this is Admiral Taiho. Begin evacuation procedures immediately. The Coalition will send transport ships to assist." "We're not calling for evacuation, Admiral," Ju interrupted. "I've been studying the swarm's behavior patterns from your shared data. I believe I understand something about its fundamental nature that your scientists have missed." Neri's tentacles stiffened in what Taiho recognized as offense. The Allo prided themselves on their scientific superiority. "With all due respect," Neri began, "the Coalition has devoted its most brilliant minds to this problem for 3 years. And yet the swarm continues to advance." Ju replied calmly. "Perhaps you need a different perspective." Taiho considered the human's words. The Coalition had tried everything within their understanding of physics and biology. Their best strategies had only slowed the swarm temporarily. What could these humans possibly know that the collective wisdom of 500 advanced species didn't? Yet desperation made strange allies, and something about the humans' confidence gave him pause. "What exactly do you claim to understand, Dr. Ju?" he asked. "The swarm isn't behaving like a coordinated invasion force," she explained. "It's exhibiting complex emergent behavior arising from simple rules at the individual unit level. This is something humans have studied extensively in natural systems on Earth." Taiho exchanged glances with Neri, whose tentacles were now twisting in thought. The doctor may have a point, Neri admitted reluctantly. We've been treating the swarm as a unified entity with central intelligence. A security officer, Captain Juno, stepped forward. Admiral, the humans are untested. Their world is about to be consumed. Of course they would claim to have a solution. Taiho understood the skepticism. Humans were emotional, unpredictable. Their science was primitive compared to most coalition species, but they were also adaptable, creative in ways that sometimes baffled the logical minds of the coalition. And what did they have to lose? The swarm had defeated every conventional approach. Dr. Zhu, Taiho decided, I'm sending a retrieval team to bring you and your research to my flagship. We'll hear your theory. Several officers looked surprised at his decision, but no one objected openly. Thank you, Admiral, Zhu responded. I'll be ready. After the communication ended, Minho approached Taiho privately. Are you certain about this, Admiral? Humans are known for their overconfidence. What choice do we have? Taiho replied, his exoskeleton clicking softly in the coalition gesture of resignation. Our best minds have failed. Our strongest weapons have failed. Perhaps it's time to try something unexpected. Taiho turned back to the holographic display, watching the darkness spread across once thriving systems. The coalition prided itself on logical thinking, on methodical approaches to problems. But logic had not saved them from the void swarm. Send our fastest ship, he ordered. If the humans have even a small insight we've missed, it's worth investigating. As the crew moved to carry out his orders, Taiho continued staring at the display. He had commanded coalition forces for over 200 years. He had faced pirates, rebellions, and even a brief war with the Centauri hegemony. But nothing had prepared him for an enemy that couldn't be reasoned with, intimidated, or destroyed by conventional means. Perhaps the humans, with their chaotic thinking and emotional intuition, might see something the coalition had missed. It was a slim hope, but hope nonetheless. Prepare my personal shuttle, Taiho added. I want to meet this human scientist myself when she arrives. The coalition retrieval ship landed at the Seoul Science Center amid a heavy rainstorm. Dr. Zhu waited under an umbrella, a small bag of personal items in one hand and a data drive in the other. She had never seen an alien before, except in transmissions. Now she was about to board their ship and travel faster than light to meet their leaders. Dr. Zhu. The alien who approached her was tall and insect-like. I am Captain Sunwoo. Admiral Taiho has sent me to bring you to the flagship. Zhu nodded and followed him into the ship. The inside was nothing like human spacecraft. Everything seemed alive somehow, with walls that pulsed with light and controls that responded to thought. Your first time seeing coalition technology? Sunwoo asked, noticing her wide eyes. Yes, she admitted. It's beautiful. The journey to the flagship took only 3 hours. Zhu spent that time reviewing her data and rehearsing her explanation. She knew she would face skepticism. The coalition species valued logic and order above all else. Her theory was based partly on instinct, on seeing patterns that defied simple explanation. When they docked with the massive coalition flagship, Zhu felt a moment of doubt. Who was she to claim understanding of something that had defeated the most advanced civilization in the galaxy? But the memory of Earth, of her home and family, strengthened her resolve. Admiral Taiho met her personally in the docking bay. He was taller than Captain Sunwoo, with 4 eyes that seemed to look in different directions at once. Dr. Zhu, welcome aboard the Steadfast Will. I hope your journey was comfortable. Thank you, Admiral. It was very quick. Taiho led her to a large room where about 20 different alien species waited. Some looked almost human, while others were completely foreign. Clouds of gas contained in hovering suits, crystalline beings that clicked and sparkled as they moved, creatures with too many limbs or eyes. This is our emergency response team, Taiho explained. The best minds in the coalition. A tentacled alien approached. I am Scientist Neri. I understand you believe you have insight into the void swarm that we lack. The way she said it made clear what she thought of that possibility. Juwu took a deep breath. "May I connect my data to your systems?" Nari gestured, and a floating platform moved toward Juwu. She placed her data drive on it, and immediately a three-dimensional display filled the center of the room. "This is the Void's warm behavior pattern from your own records," Juwu began. She gestured, and the display showed tiny dots moving and multiplying. "And this is a simulation of water molecules forming into a hurricane." She placed the images side by side. The patterns were almost identical. "You see," she said, "the swarm isn't acting with central intelligence. It's a complex system emerging from simple rules at the individual level." "We are aware of emergent behavior patterns," Neri said. "This is basic science." "Yes, but you're still fighting the swarm as if it's an army, with a general making decisions," Juwu replied. "You're trying to outthink it. But there's nothing to outthink. The swarm follows rules based on energy efficiency and resource acquisition. It's not planning, it's reacting." Admiral Tejo stepped closer to the display. "Explain what this means for our defense strategy." "It means your current approach is doomed to fail," Juwu said bluntly. "Every time you attack the swarm directly, you provide it with new information. It adapts not because it's intelligent, but because the units that survive your attack naturally have properties that make them resistant." She showed another simulation. "This is what happens when you hit a complex system with direct force. It doesn't destroy the system. It makes it stronger by eliminating the weaker elements." One of the alien officers made a noise that sounded like breaking glass. "So you're saying we should not fight?" "I'm saying you're fighting it wrong," Juwu explained, pointing to her simulation. "The swarm isn't a unified entity. It's a complex system with simple rules. You're treating it like an army when it's more like a weather pattern." The coalition officers exchanged skeptical glances. Juwu could read their doubt even on faces so alien to her. They saw humans as emotional, illogical beings, and here she was, telling them their entire approach was mistaken. "On Earth, we don't fight hurricanes with weapons," she continued. "We predict their path. We create barriers. We evacuate. Sometimes we even seed clouds to change weather patterns." "Are you suggesting we simply avoid the swarm?" asked a crystalline being that sparkled with each word. "No. I'm suggesting we use its own patterns against it. We understand how it behaves, so we can predict where it will go based on resource availability and energy gradients. Then we can set traps." Admiral Tejo's exoskeleton clicked thoughtfully. "What kind of traps?" Juwu manipulated the display again. "The swarm seeks energy and matter in the most efficient way possible. If we create false targets, systems that appear resource-rich but contain disruptive elements, we can break its cohesion." "We have tried luring the swarm before," Nari objected. "It detected our traps." "Because you designed your traps with too much obvious logic," Juwu countered. "The swarm adapts to patterns. The key is to introduce the right variable at the right time, something unpredictable that disrupts the entire system." She showed them a new simulation where a seemingly random element was introduced to the swarm pattern. The system immediately broke down into chaos. "Your technology is advanced, but you think too linearly," Juwu said. "Sometimes the answer isn't about having the biggest weapon. It's about understanding the patterns and introducing the right variable at the right time." For a moment, the room was silent. Then Admiral Tejo turned to scientist Nari. Could her approach work? Nari's tentacles twirled in what seemed like the alien equivalent of deep thought. "The theory is sound," she admitted reluctantly. "We have been approaching the problem from our traditional perspective of direct confrontation. If the swarm truly operates as Dr. Juwu suggests, then a less direct approach might be more effective." "What would you need to test this theory?" Tahoe asked Juwu. "A small swarm sample in a controlled environment," she replied, "and access to your energy manipulation technology." Tahoe nodded slowly. "We have a quarantine facility where we've been studying captured swarm particles. You can conduct your tests there. As the meeting broke up, several coalition scientists approached Chu with questions. Their initial skepticism was giving way to cautious interest. Only humans, with their chaotic history and complex social structures, had developed such extensive understanding of unpredictable systems. Dr. Ju, Admiral Tahoe said as he walked her to her quarters, "I must ask, why are you so confident in your theory?" Ju smiled slightly. "On Earth, we live with chaos every day. Our weather, our oceans, our societies. They're all complex systems that can't be controlled directly. We've learned to work with them rather than against them." Tahoe's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "Perhaps that is why your species has survived despite your technological limitations. You understand chaos because you live within it." "Exactly," Ju said. "And now that understanding might save us all." The quarantine lab hummed with energy as Dr. Ju worked. For 2 weeks, she had barely slept, studying the captured void-swarm particles. Coalition scientists watched with growing interest as her theories began to show results in small-scale tests. "Remarkable," said scientist Neri, her tentacles moving in graceful patterns that Ju had learned indicated excitement. "The particles do indeed follow the path you predicted." Ju nodded, adjusting the energy field in the test chamber. Inside, the tiny machines that made up the void-swarm sample flowed like water toward a specific point. "They seek the path of least resistance," she explained, "like water flowing downhill or electricity following the easiest path through a circuit." Admiral Tahoe entered the lab, followed by a broad-shouldered alien with massive mandibles that clicked constantly. Even after 2 weeks aboard the flagship, Ju still found it hard to read coalition body language, but the newcomer's posture screamed tension. "Dr. Ju, this is General Doyan, commander of our military forces in this sector," Tahoe said. Doyan's 4 arms were crossed over his armored chest. "So you're the human who thinks she can solve in weeks what our greatest minds couldn't solve in years." "I don't claim to have all the answers," Ju replied calmly. "I simply bring a different perspective." "Admiral Tahoe tells me you're ready to present your strategy," Doyan said. "I've come to hear it myself." Ju gestured to the holographic display. "The void swarm operates on basic rules. It moves toward energy sources and convertible matter. It avoids certain radiation frequencies and gravitational distortions. If we understand these rules, we can predict its behavior." She activated a larger simulation showing a star system with several planets. "My strategy has 3 parts. First, we map the swarm's current pattern and identify its most likely paths based on resource availability. Second, we create deliberate vulnerabilities in certain areas." "Vulnerabilities?" Doyan interrupted, his mandibles clicking rapidly. "You want us to weaken our defenses." "Please let her finish, General," Tahoe said quietly. Ju continued, "These aren't true vulnerabilities. They're controlled pathways that will funnel the swarm where we want it to go. Think of it as digging channels to direct a flood away from a village." She manipulated the display, showing energy fields creating paths through the system. "Once the swarm follows these paths, we implement the 3rd part of the strategy. We use your gravity technology to create sudden, unpredictable changes in the environment, changes that disrupt the swarm's cohesion." General Doyan's eyes narrowed. "You want us to make ourselves weaker?" he asked, mandibles clicking in agitation. "This is madness." "Not weaker," Ju replied. "We're creating a path of least resistance. The swarm follows energy efficiency patterns. If we understand those patterns, we can predict where it will go." She turned to Admiral Tahoe. "I believe we're ready for a real-world test, a small one, where the risk is minimal." Tahoe considered this. "The moon of Keltaris has been evacuated. The swarm is expected to reach it in 3 days. It's small enough that if your strategy fails, we won't lose much. But if it works," Ju added, "we'll have proof that the swarm can be controlled." "I oppose this," General Doyan said firmly. "Deliberately allowing the swarm into any system goes against all military doctrine. And yet our current doctrine has failed consistently, Taiho replied. We will try Dr. Juwu's approach at Keltaris. 3 days later, Juwu stood on the bridge of the flagship, now positioned safely away from Keltaris. The mood was tense. Many coalition officers clearly expected failure, but they had followed her instructions precisely. Energy emitters had been positioned around the moon, creating invisible pathways that only the swarm would detect. Swarm approaching detection range, reported a sensor officer. On the main view screen, they watched as the cloud of microscopic machines appeared at the edge of the system. It moved like a living thing, tendrils reaching out to test the environment. It's sensing the energy gradients, Juwu said quietly. Watch. For a tense minute, the swarm seemed to hesitate. Then, just as Juwu had predicted, it began flowing along the invisible pathway they had created. It's working, Neri said, her voice filled with wonder. It's following the exact route you calculated. The swarm moved steadily toward a region of the moon where the coalition had placed specially designed energy emitters. These devices would suddenly change their output in patterns based on mathematical chaos theory, introducing unpredictability that the swarm couldn't adapt to quickly. Prepare to activate the disruptors on my mark, Juwu said, watching the swarm's position carefully. Timing was crucial. 3, 2, 1. Now. Across the surface of the moon, dozens of emitters activated simultaneously. The energy field around the moon fluctuated in complex, unpredictable patterns. On the view screen, they could see the swarm's cohesion begin to break down. Instead of moving as one unified mass, it fragmented into smaller clusters that moved erratically. The swarm is losing cohesion, the sensor officer reported. Coordination between units has dropped by 60% and falling. A cheer went up from the coalition crew. For the first time, they had successfully disrupted the void swarm's behavior. This is only temporary, Juwu cautioned them. The swarm will eventually adapt. But we've proven the concept. We can predict where it will go, and we can disrupt its coordination. Admiral Taiho's exoskeleton vibrated in what Juwu had learned was the equivalent of a pleased expression. You've given us something we haven't had in 3 years, Dr. Juwu. Hope. Even General Do-Yun seemed impressed. I still don't fully understand your methods, human, but I cannot argue with results. What's our next step? We need to scale up, Juwu replied. The test worked on a small concentration of the swarm. Now we need to try it on a larger scale, perhaps at a system the swarm is approaching but hasn't reached yet. The Proxima system, Taiho suggested. It's largely evacuated already, but it's resource-rich and directly in the swarm's path. Juwu nodded. Perfect. But we'll need more equipment, more precise gravitational controls. You'll have whatever you need, Taiho promised. As they began planning the larger operation, Juwu felt a mixture of hope and anxiety. The test had worked perfectly, almost too perfectly. The swarm had behaved exactly as she predicted, which was remarkable for a system with so many variables. That night, alone in her quarters, she reviewed the data again. Something was bothering her, some pattern just at the edge of her perception. The swarm's behavior was consistent with her chaos theory models, but there was an underlying order she couldn't quite grasp. What are you? She whispered to the images of the swarm on her screen. What are you really? She fell asleep at her desk, dreaming of microscopic machines flowing like water through the stars, following invisible currents that only she could see. In her dream, the swarm wasn't an enemy but a message, a complex pattern trying to communicate something vital. She just couldn't understand what it was saying. Not yet. The news of the successful test on Keltaris's moon spread quickly through coalition space. For the first time in 3 years, the unstoppable void swarm had been predicted and disrupted. Ships that had been fleeing in panic now paused. Leaders who had given up hope now listened intently to reports from Admiral Taiho's flagship. The human was right. They whispered in 100 different languages across 1,000 worlds. On the coalition homeworld, the High Council called an emergency session. The eldest member, Chairperson Yuna, activated the communication link to the flagship. Admiral Taiho, is it true? Can this human scientist control the Void Swarm? Not control, Chairperson, Taiho replied. But Dr. Juwu can predict its movements and disrupt its cohesion. It's the first real progress we've made. We need more humans, another council member suggested. If one human could see what our best minds missed, perhaps others of their kind share this insight. Within days, coalition ships arrived at Earth. They came not as conquerors or rescuers, but as supplicants seeking help from a species they had previously viewed as primitive. 27 human scientists with backgrounds in chaos theory, emergent systems, and complex mathematics were brought to the flagship. Dr. Juwu met them in the main hangar bay, feeling a strange mixture of pride and relief at seeing other humans. "Welcome aboard," she said as they stared wide-eyed at the alien technology around them. "I hope you packed light. We have a lot of work to do." The human scientists were quickly integrated into the coalition research teams. At first, there was friction. The coalition scientists valued precision, logic, and methodical approaches. The humans worked more intuitively, making creative leaps and following hunches. But as results began to emerge, mutual respect grew. "It's fascinating," scientist Neri told Juwu as they watched the teams work together. "Your species thinks so differently from ours. You make connections we would never consider. And you have the technology to test our wildest theories." Juwu replied with a smile. Over the next month, they developed a bold plan. The success at Keltaris had proven the concept on a small scale. Now they would apply it to the main body of the Void Swarm itself. In the flagship's strategy room, Juwu presented the plan to Admiral Taiho, General Doyun, and the High Council members who had traveled to see for themselves. "We're going to create a honeypot," Juwu explained, showing them a star system on the edge of coalition space. "The Taiyan system has been evacuated, but we'll make it appear incredibly resource-rich. Energy signatures, material concentrations, everything the swarm seeks." "And when the swarm arrives?" asked Chairperson Yuna. Juwu manipulated the display, showing devices positioned throughout the system. "These are quantum resonators, built using a combination of your technology and designs from our human team. They'll generate energy patterns based on complex mathematical sequences, patterns that will disrupt the swarm's ability to coordinate." "You're sure this will work on the main swarm body?" General Doyun asked, his mandibles moving slowly in what Juwu had learned was a thoughtful gesture. "No," Juwu admitted honestly, "but our models give it a 63% chance of success. That's better odds than anything else we've tried." The plan was approved. For the next 2 weeks, coalition engineers worked around the clock to prepare the Taiyan system. Massive energy emitters were installed on abandoned planets and moons. Quantum resonators, each the size of a small building, were positioned at precise mathematical intervals throughout the system. Juwu barely slept, checking and rechecking the calculations. The other human scientists worked just as hard, refining the mathematical sequences that would disrupt the swarm. Finally, everything was ready. Coalition forces retreated to a safe distance. The honeypot was activated, sending out energy signatures that, the swarm, would appear like the richest feast in the galaxy. "Now we wait," Admiral Taiho said, joining Juwu at the observation window. Beyond, the stars shimmered peacefully, giving no hint of the existential threat that had consumed hundreds of worlds. "How long?" Juwu asked. "Our sensors detect the main swarm changing course," Taiho replied. "It should reach Taiyan in approximately 30 hours." News of the operation spread throughout coalition space. Billions of beings on thousands of worlds paused their evacuations to watch. This was humanity's strategy, their one hope against extinction. When the swarm arrived at Taiyan, it was even larger than their sensors had indicated. A vast cloud of microscopic machines, so dense it blocked out the light of Taiyan's sun from certain angles. It moved with an eerie grace, like a predator stalking its prey. "It's beautiful, in a terrible way," one of the human scientists murmured. For 3 days, they watched as the swarm explored the system, gradually consolidating around the planets where they had placed the strongest energy signatures. It was following their predictions exactly, gathering more and more of its mass in anticipation of a feast. Swarm concentration has reached optimal levels, Nari reported. 87% of the main body is now within range of our resonators. Juwu took a deep breath. This was the moment everything depended on. If she was wrong, if the swarm reacted differently than expected, they would lose their best chance to stop it. Once consolidated, we trigger these quantum resonators, Juwu explained to the coalition leaders who had gathered to watch. They'll create a harmonic disruption that prevents the swarm from maintaining its collective intelligence. Admiral Tejo looked at her steadily with all four eyes. Give the order, Dr. Juwu. This is your plan. Juwu nodded and turned to the communications officer. Activate all resonators, sequence alpha. Throughout the Taiyan system, the massive devices powered up. Each generated a unique energy pattern based on mathematical principles derived from chaos theory. Alone, each pattern would have minimal effect. Together, they created a symphony of disruptive energy that the swarm could not adapt to quickly enough. On the main viewer, they watched as the swarm's coherent movement began to falter. The massive cloud that had moved with such unified purpose now rippled and twisted erratically. It's working, Nari exclaimed, her tentacles twirling in excitement. Swarm cohesion dropping rapidly. The effect spread through the swarm like ripples in a pond. As each section lost coordination, it disrupted adjacent sections. What had been a unified entity became billions of individual machines, each following its basic programming without the emergent intelligence that had made the swarm so deadly. Maintain resonator output, Juwu ordered. We need to keep the disruption going until the swarm fully breaks down. For hours, they watched as the greatest threat the coalition had ever faced disintegrated before their eyes. The massive cloud dispersed into smaller and smaller clusters, each becoming less effective. When Chairperson Yuna placed a gentle hand on Juwu's shoulder, the human scientist realized she had been holding her breath. You've done it, Yuna said softly. You've saved us all. But Juwu shook her head, watching the final readings from the resonators. Not yet. This is just the beginning. We've disrupted the main swarm body, but there are still smaller concentrations throughout coalition space, and we need to understand why the swarm appeared in the first place. Still, as cheers erupted around her and aliens of a dozen different species expressed their joy in their own unique ways, Juwu allowed herself a small smile. Humanity had proved its worth to the galaxy, and she had found a pattern in the chaos that had once seemed uncontrollable. The grand hall of the Coalition's central world glittered with light reflecting off crystalline walls. Representatives from 500 species filled the vast chamber, their diverse forms creating a living tapestry of galactic life. Some floated in hover tanks, others towered on multiple legs, while some appeared almost human except for subtle differences in coloration or the number of eyes. Dr. Juwu stood at the entrance, tugging uncomfortably at the formal coalition robe she had been given to wear. The shimmering blue material felt strange against her skin, but she had been told it was a great honor to receive such ceremonial attire. Ready? Admiral Tejo asked, his four eyes blinking in sequence. As ready as I'll ever be, Juwu replied. 1 year had passed since the honeypot operation. 1 year since the main body of the void swarm had broken apart into harmless fragments under the influence of the quantum resonators. In that time, Juwu had worked with coalition scientists to refine her methods, developing tools that could track and neutralize the remaining swarm clusters. 217 worlds had been saved, billions of lives spared. Species that had been on the verge of extinction now had a future again. The Coalition's supreme speaker, an ancient being named Elder Jinwu, raised his 12 arms for silence. The murmuring in the hall gradually faded. Today, Elder Jinwu announced, his voice amplified throughout the chamber, we gather to celebrate victory over the greatest threat our civilization has ever faced. For 3 years, the Void Swarm consumed our worlds, defeated our weapons, and drove us to the edge of extinction. Now, the Coalition officially declares the Void Swarm threat neutralized. A sound like rolling thunder filled the hall as the assembled representatives cheered, whistled, clicked, hummed, and expressed joy in hundreds of different ways. Ju felt tears in her eyes. She thought of Earth, of her family, of all the worlds that would now continue to thrive. None of this would have been possible. Elder Jinwu continued when the noise subsided, without the insight of a species that, just 1 year ago, many considered primitive. I invite Admiral Taiho and Dr. Ju of Earth to address the assembly. Taiho guided Ju onto the central platform, which rose slowly until they could be seen by everyone in the hall. Ju had never spoken to so many beings before. Each face, whether it had eyes, sensory stalks, or detection plates, was turned toward her. Admiral Taiho stepped forward first. For 10,000 years, the Coalition has faced challenges with logical solutions, careful planning, and technological superiority. When the Void Swarm appeared, we applied these same approaches. We built bigger weapons. We analyzed its composition. We attempted to destroy it directly. All failed. He gestured toward Ju. Then came a distress call from Earth, a world so new to space travel that many of us had never heard of it. A human scientist claimed to understand what we could not. Many doubted. I admit I was skeptical myself. Taho's exoskeleton clicked in what Ju now recognized as amusement. Today we recognize not just an individual, but a perspective that saved us all. Taiho announced. For millennia, the Coalition has valued logical progression, predictability, and order. We saw these as the pinnacle of intelligent development. Dr. Ju showed us that sometimes chaos holds the answer. Ju stepped forward, feeling the weight of hundreds of alien gazes. For a moment, she thought of how strange this all was. A year ago, she had never even left Earth. Now she stood before representatives of the entire galaxy. The Void Swarm wasn't defeated with superior firepower, she said, her voice calm despite her nerves. It was defeated with understanding. By recognizing patterns in chaos, by predicting the unpredictable, we turned the swarm's nature against itself. She activated a holographic display showing the quantum resonator network from the honeypot operation. This approach wasn't uniquely human. It required Coalition technology, Coalition resources, and Coalition courage. But perhaps what humans contributed was a willingness to see order in chaos, patterns in randomness. On Earth, we live with uncertainty every day, in our weather, our oceans, our societies. We've learned to find the hidden rules governing seemingly random systems. The hall was completely silent now, every being listening intently. The Coalition and humanity are stronger together than apart, Ju concluded. Your logic and our intuition. Your technology and our creativity. That combination saved us once. Imagine what it could accomplish in peace. The applause was deafening. As the platform lowered, Ju and Taiho were surrounded by representatives eager to speak with them. Coalition protocol specialists tried to maintain order, but the excitement was too great. Hours later, after countless conversations and formal greetings, Ju finally found a quiet balcony overlooking the capital city. Lights twinkled as far as she could see, each representing beings who would have perished without her insight. It was overwhelming to consider. Admiral Taiho joined her, offering a drink in a crystalline cup. It's water, he assured her. I remember how you reacted to Coalition refreshments at our first meeting. Ju laughed. The blue fizzy liquid. It tasted like gasoline and cinnamon. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, looking out at the city. The Coalition is voting tomorrow on offering Earth full membership, Taiho said. The fastest ascension in our history. Your world will have equal standing with species that have been spacefaring for thousands of years. That's good, Ju replied. Earth has much to learn from the Coalition, and perhaps some things to teach as well. Indeed, Taiho's voice became quieter. We thought we were rescuing a primitive world, he told Juwu privately. Instead, you rescued us from our own limitations. Juwu smiled. That's the human specialty, finding opportunities in impossible situations. The universe is too complex for any single approach. Sometimes you need a bit of human chaos to find the hidden patterns. The Chaotic Human Institute will be completed next month, Tahoe said. Already, 200 coalition scientists have requested to study there alongside human teachers. The institute had been Chairperson Yuna's idea, a place where coalition species could learn humanity's approach to complex systems and chaos theory. In return, humans would gain access to advanced coalition science. And what about you? Tahoe asked. Will you return to Earth or stay here as the Institute's director? Juwu looked out at the alien city, so different from her home yet now somehow familiar. Both, I think. Earth is still my home. But the stars are our future. Above them, the night sky was filled with points of light, stars that would now continue to shine on living worlds instead of dead husks stripped by the void swarm. Somewhere out there, Earth waited, no longer alone in the vastness of space. The void swarm had been defeated not by the logical, ordered approach of the coalition, nor by humanity's chaotic intuition alone, but by the powerful combination of both. It was a lesson neither civilization would forget. As celebrations continued throughout the capital city, Juwu thought about the future, a future where humans and aliens work together, each bringing their unique perspective to the greater challenges that surely awaited them among the stars. The end.